Hi, I'm Jen Newton, the registered dietitian at the Sky Lakes Wellness Center. I wanted to spend some time today talking with you about recipe substitutions. Often we may end up in the kitchen prepared to make a dish for the family, and we end up realizing we don't have ingredients that the recipe specifically calls for. So today I want to run through a recipe for a one-pot bean chili and talk about some of the substitutions that we can make. So first, looking at some of our ingredients, we have canned beans. So this is usually a staple in or should be a staple in our pantry. We don't need to have a ton of these on hand, but having a couple of different cans of beans can be really helpful in a pinch. In this case, we're using kidney beans, but we can use any type of beans that we have available, whether it's black beans or if you prefer white beans, that's fine too. This particular recipe also calls for corn. So in this case, we're going to be using some canned corn. If you have frozen corn, that's also a fantastic option to use as well. We're also using some canned tomatoes. Again, one of those staples that we should have in our cabinet, in our pantry because they're so versatile for us, whether it's in soups and stews or making our own tomato sauce, but we're going to be using that in our recipe today as well. Our recipe is also calling for some different vegetables. Now in this case, I do happen to have some fresh carrots, so I'm going to be chopping those up to put in, but know that you can also use canned carrots or frozen carrots as well. And the frozen and canned are things, obviously they're going to keep longer in your household than the fresh will, and so it can be a nice idea to have some of those on hand too. Now, we're using a fresh bell pepper, so this particular recipe also calls for bell pepper and onion. Now, I don't have onion on hand, but let's look at our options for the bell pepper and onion. So we can find frozen, pre-cut bell pepper and onion that we can keep in our freezer and have it on hand anytime we need it. In this case, I have a fresh bell pepper that I'm going to use up, but I don't have an onion available. So there are a couple other substitutions that you can use for that. One could be using some minced onion, which is what I have. So I have some dehydrated chopped onion. So for the equivalent of a cup of diced fresh onion, I'm going to use a 1/4 cup of the minced dehydrated onion. If all I have is onion powder, I can use that as well. And it would be about 1 to 1.5 tablespoons that I would use of that. My recipe is also calling for garlic. You can never go wrong with garlic, and I tend to always have this in my house. But if I don't have any fresh cloves available, I can find the chopped garlic that it is a little bit more shelf stable. Let me rephrase that. It does well in your refrigerator after it's been opened, and it can be really convenient, especially if you struggle with peeling or chopping the garlic. Or we can also use garlic powder, and this is going to be the equivalent of about 1/8 of a teaspoon for every clove of garlic that you want to use. Okay, so we also want to make sure that we're using a little bit of chicken broth or a little bit of broth in general, whether it's vegetable, chicken, or beef. That's really up to you. I don't have any cans or boxes of fresh chicken stock available for me, but what I love to use is bouillon. So this is something that would require refrigeration after it's opened. You could also have something that's a little bit more shelf stable, which would be the bouillon cubes that you could find in your cabinet. So both of those are great ways of just adding a little bit of extra flavor to the dishes that you're making. So with this, we also need to make sure we have the right tools. So having a can opener to make sure that we can open the jars and the cans that we're going to be using will also be very helpful. So now I'm going to take a few minutes and throw this together, and then I'm going to show you the final product as we finish up. Okay, so we combined all of our ingredients into our pot and we let it cook on the stove for about 15 to 30 minutes. Really what we were doing there is making sure that we get any fresh vegetables that we use to soften up a little bit, to get it heated all the way through and really to blend the flavors together. So what we've ended up with is this delicious, fantastic smelling dish, this one-pot chili. It's great to eat on its own. You could top baked potatoes with this as well. You can make nachos out of it. It's pretty versatile. Also, I want to note that with recipes like this, there is a lot of flexibility with it. So these are opportunities for us to use up fresh produce that might be near the end of its lifespan that we want to just make sure we use up before it goes bad. And we can, again, remember to substitute when we don't have a specific ingredient available. Maybe consider something else in your pantry or in your freezer. I encourage you to check out our Facebook page for this and other recipes, as well as tips to help make cooking a little bit easier.